This is where we classify the supply, whether it is a taxable supply or a non-taxable supply. If it is a taxable supply, it can either be at a standard rate or at zero rate. If it is a non-taxable supply, it is exempt. Now, as I said, taxable supplies are either zero rated. With zero rated supplies, it means this supply is attracting output tax at 0%. However, zero rated supplies, because they are taxable supplies, you are allowed to claim input tax if the input tax is claimable based on the input tax rules. With standard rated supplies, it means the output tax is at 15%. But with exempt supplies, although the output tax is zero, they differ from zero rated supplies in the sense that you cannot claim input tax on that supply. So the next question is, question 1, should there be VAT? The answer is yes. Question 2, at what rate? And say the standard rate. The next question will be when. And the when is, time of supply rules determine when a taxpayer should account for any output tax applicable for a taxable supply. What is important is, when we talk about time of supply rules, and even for examination purposes, it's a rule and not a date. So if we ask you what is the time of supply, we're not asking on which day should you record them. But what we are saying is, give us the rule. So you have time of supply rules for different types of transactions. Generally, the general rule for time of supply is the earlier of an invoice being issued or a payment being made is the general time of supply. And quite recently this has been adjusted to say whenever goods have been delivered, that becomes the time of supply. But this is the 2019 adjustment that came through at the December 2018 budget, which will be part of your syllabus. Section 8.2 deals with supplies for connected persons. Now you want to have a look at when are we saying there is a supply if connected people are supplying to each other. Why do you have such rules? The thinking is, whenever you have connected persons transacting, there is a high probability that they can connive to manipulate either the timing or the amount of a transaction, thereby lowering or raising their tax liability in any tax period. So there's going to be rules which is more of an anti-avoidance provision to ensure that tax is fair. There are rules to do with all installment credit arrangements, and such installment credit agreements have rules in and around, is it a sale or is it a lease, and within that, within each category, there will be further rules to say if it is a sale, are they clearly defined terms of the sale? Does the total cash payments that the recipient of the goods or services, are they going to exceed the cash price? Is there a finance cost element or a financing interest element in the total receipts? And then it also looks at who bears the risks and the rewards during the period of the installment credit agreement. All these characteristics, you must know them for you to be able to assess a transaction and say and conclude whether or not it is an installment credit agreement. But the reason why all this classification is important is, if it is an installment credit agreement, then the time of supply becomes upfront. If it is not, then it will be a different story. If it's under a rental agreement, all successive supplies, as the customer pays their rentals, or as the rentals fall due, which is what successive supply is all about, this is where the time of supply is deemed to be. So this is going to be very important for you to go through section 8.3 and the various circumstances under which an installment credit arrangement may arise. Better still, and related to common market transactions. So For your integrated learning, you will have situations where you have sale and lease back as a type of lease or manufacturer dealer leases. You should be able to then say, is it for tax purposes installment credit agreement? But more importantly, the lease standards are also evolving. Now that we have IFRS 16, you still need to be able to relate to that standard. Section 8.3 also deals, as I've said, with rental agreements where you're deemed to be successively supplying with each and every rental falling due. Section 8.3 deals with goods being supplied successively or progressively. So you also have other sections that deal with different types of transactions with specific times of supply. Betting, for an example. At what point are you said to have supplied? Is it at the time the ticket is bought? Is it at the time that if you're betting for a horse, is it at the time that the horse wins? And so on and so on. Fixed property transactions have separate rules from all the other, from 8.3, 8.2 or 8.1. Goods whose consideration is not determined at the time of appropriation, repossessed goods, all these you will need to go through each and every type of transaction for you to determine the time of supply. You also have a time of supply that is coming about from transactions that have to do with adjustments. A transaction has happened before, but now there is an adjustment that has to be made to that transaction, and there is a VAT adjustment that has to be made. The question is, when should that adjustment happen? So you must always be on the lookout for question 3. And question 3 is when. When should VAT arise? Time of supply. The last of the 4 questions would be, what value? Now that I know the rate and I know when I'm supposed to raise the VAT, but at what value must I apply the rate so that I come up with the VAT itself? So section 9 deals with rules around the value of the supply. And again, with the value of supply, there will be a general rule, which is value of supply is the consideration less VAT. So consideration is an amount that includes VAT. Example, if I sell a shirt for $10 before VAT and put $1.50 VAT, which is 15%, and sell the shirt to the customer will pay me $11.50. $11.50 is the consideration. So, value of supply is $10. VAT is $1.50. Consideration is $11.50. So general rule, value of supply is the consideration less VAT. If you know the consideration, you can work backwards to the value of supply. And that's covered by section 9 too. But section 9 defines what consideration is. It also starts looking at consideration that is not in money. For instance, there's a barter trade. Yes, the shirt price is $11.50, but someone then pays me a golf shirt for a Friday shirt. So whilst the price tag on my Friday shirt is $11.50, we now need to know what the price of the golf shirt is. And clarity in terms of section 9.3, where the consideration is not in money, the open market value becomes the consideration. Supply by connected persons for no consideration or consideration less than open market value. Again, these types of transactions are subject to abuse for either lowering or upping the taxes. So section 9.4, you need to go thoroughly through all the circumstances and to go through the provision that then guides how to determine value of supply where the supply is by connected persons. You also have section 9.5, which deals with deemed supplies at cessation of trade, or transfer of goods to independent branches, goods that are supplied under installment credit agreement, as we already discussed, is under section 9.6. Any deemed supplies based on adjustments, as I mentioned earlier, you look at section 9.7 or section 17, you read it with section 17. So that, in a nutshell, is value of supply. And then beyond all this, what happens is you could have a situation where there is no real supply, loosely, but we still have output tax in that the supply is now deemed to have happened. So there's a section that has looked at transactions that ordinarily would be difficult to clearly say that there has been a supply by a registered operator for the purpose of trade on or after the fixed date. But then they are listed for clarity purpose to say these are deemed to be supplies, even if they could potentially escape the ordinary meaning of supply, or it can be very difficult to interpret supply in their circumstances. They are nominated, they were listed, and it's clarification to say they will be deemed to be supplied. The first one is wherever there is a sale of property or assets or goods or services in execution of date. So it's possible that a taxpayer A owes another person B, and B goes to A based on some court order, and they seize A's property. A has not really sold goods, but the seized goods, if it's sold in execution of that debt, A is deemed to have sold. So in that section, you're now being given what the time of supply is and what the value of supply is. You have cessation of trade by a registered operator. In this case, a registered operator may have been operating. Let's just take, for instance, inventory. The registered operator bought inventory years ago, and they claimed VAT on within the period, the prescribed period, and because they have not yet sold, there's no output tax. But now, if they cease to operate as a registered operator, they are deemed to have sold, so that the collection of VAT can happen, for which input tax has already been. Door-to-door sales with an option to return the goods, labor agreements for a consideration of not less than $25, supply of a business as a going concern, indemnity payment under an insurance, transfer of goods to independent branches. All these are specific examples of deemed supply, for which they are special in terms of both time of supply and value of supply. These times of supply and values of supply are varied. So the goods sold under rental agreements, installment credit agreements, and sales to connected persons, goods applied on use. All these things, as you must then go through and study those. For practice, you must be able to discuss the time of supply and value of supply of cessation of trade, labor agreement, installment credit agreement, door-to-door sales, and let's see how it goes. Now, moving on, having dealt with the output tax side of the VAT, payable or refundable, we need to understand the input tax side. Now, the input tax is a deduction that you can get, and section 16 is the one that generally guides us. And generally, you can claim input tax on goods provided that they are utilized for the production of taxable supplies. So here, let's assume you are providing educational services such as CAA. If you are producing educational services as defined, it means you are not making any taxable supplies, assuming that's the only supply that CAA has. If you go and buy supplies such as water for the lecturers, which reminds me, I think I need to take a glass. Then what is required is, as you buy the water, it is important that you are charged VAT if the water is bought from a registered operator. Now, can CAA claim the VAT that it was charged by the registered operator, the supplier of that water? And the answer based on this rule is no. For as long as CAA has used this service as in part as it is making non-taxable supplies, it cannot claim tax. The second next issue, big issue there would be that it's possible that CAA may be making mixed supplies. Part of it is educational services and part are maybe consultancy services. In which case now you would need to apportion the input tax based on the ratio of taxable and non-taxable supplies that is supplied. Acceptable basis is 10 over. So generally, and as well, it is not possible to claim any input tax if no input tax was charged by the supplier of those goods or services. So if a deduction is eligible for input tax, a payment is eligible for input tax, the next question is, does it not appear under a list of prohibited deductions, which include entertainment, purchase of passenger motor vehicles, subscription fees to clubs or associations of a recreational nature? There's more to that list, but these are the common ones. So with mixed supply, here are examples where you can have a block of flats that is being used for both residential and commercial. With residential accommodation, that is an exempt supply, whilst commercial space is sold at a standard rate. So any, say, the cleaner's bill, if cleaning is for the entire block, it would have to be, the input tax would have to be apportioned. An entity operating a hospital, pharmacy and shops. The hospital may predominantly be offering medical services which are exempt, but the pharmacy may have drugs that are taxable, zero rated, in some cases even exempt as well. And the shops, there could be shops on the hospital institution which could be offering taxable supplies. So that's an example of a mixed supply. Then you also have transport companies that operate buses. So now with buses, first if you have buses that fare paying passengers, that supply is exempt. The operator must not charge VAT to fare paying passengers. You can also have buses that ferry passengers, even if they're fare paying, to export countries. That is a zero rated supply. And specifically, where you have fare paying passengers going to an export country, the zero rating takes precedence over the exemption. And then you also have the same buses that can be used for hire. That's the third category. And hiring where the passengers that go on board are not fare paying passengers is not exempt, but is actually standard rated. So that's a typical case of a mixed supply. And an example of where apportionment of input tax can happen is if you're going to buy tires and put them in a store. How much of those tires, some of them will be used on buses that are supplying a zero-rated service, some for an exempt service, and some for standard rated. So apportionment is going to be very important. A car manufacturer that sells cars and offering mortgage finance for the inventory. The mortgage, the financing bit of the business will be exempt because it's a financial service. So you will go to the end of your study unit. It should read study unit A actually, study unit B rather, for the end of study practice question. Thank you very much for listening to part 1 of the